Welcome back to Trust in the Force. Merry Sithmas. I'm your host, Vactor. I'm here with one of my favorite Star Wars fans in all the galaxy, Super Tim. Tim, how are you doing today?
Fantastic.
Excellent.
Ready to talk some Skeleton Crew because
Yes. We've been
spoiler alert, I loved it.
nice. You got it right off the bat. So stay tuned. We're gonna give all of our thoughts on Skeleton Crew, but we have been anticipating this show for a while. If you've been following our channel, if you talk to us individually, you know that we first of all we love Star Wars, but second of all, we are just jonesing for new Star Wars content. Every time there's a new show announced, a new movie, we're always wanting to get the latest and greatest. So Skeleton Crew has been one of those ones that we've been following. It got delayed a couple times. It got pushed back. It was supposed to come out holiday season of last year, and I think they filmed it in 2021 or 2022, something like that.
Yeah, sounds about
So
right.
it's been a while. It's funny because now the actors are doing press, and you could hear the kids' voices are different. They're bigger now. Jude Law looks the same, except for he got a little less hair on his widow's peaks. But other than that, it's funny to see the press tours for it. But let's get right into it. What were your expectations leading into this, Tim? What were you expecting out of Skeleton Crew?
Well, expectations. We knew this was coming after the Acolyte, and after the Acolyte. I mean, I love the Acolyte, but I was starting to feel a little bit of Star Wars fatigue, a little bit.
Ooh,
Yeah, I know. And that saddened me a little bit. And I'm just like, well, we'll see how Skeleton Crew shakes out. We'll see how it goes. I liked what I saw in the trailer. Jude Law's great, and the the ET Amblin vibes were very present in the trailers. So I was mildly anticipating it. I'm like, okay, well, and and it got pushed up. Pushed up. It was supposed to be coming out last night, and then it got pushed up to Monday. But new episodes will still be on Tuesday going forward. And hearing the also hearing the directors that they had for this, because we knew John Watts was attached forever, and that was exciting. Um, but also seeing that David Lowery, who directed The Green Knight, directed episode 2 and is directing another episode. Jake Schreier, who's directing Thunderbolts for Marvel. We got the Daniels, who directed I'm gonna mess up this title. Everything, Everywhere, All at Once.
yes, that's right.
Oh, yay! I got it right. Every time I talk about that movie, I'm like, that's not the right title. That's not right. And I butcher it. And so, yeah, so seeing those directors was like Bryce Dallas Howard, of course, has been doing solid Star Wars work since The Mandalorian. So I was really excited. And so, yeah, so looking forward to it. So then when I sat down, I was blown away.
Nice. When I was watching from the jump, I was expecting to enjoy this show after the first
Mm-hmm.
trailer and it's
Yeah.
Star Wars. Also, I liked the Amblin stuff growing up, E.T., Goonies, all of those type of things, but I wasn't a huge fan. This show, I got to say, makes me, it puts me back into that time period in that place that I was in, and I just when I finished it, I said, "Man, that was just so much fun." And that's
Yeah.
something I think in Star Wars that we need right now. This is I think coming at the perfect time. I'm glad they released it at this time. There wasn't a whole lot of stuff going on right now in Star Wars, so I'm really happy to have Skeleton Crew in my life right now because I like you, I was kind of blown away and did not expect to like it as much as I did. The look of it, like it feels like a movie. It
Yeah.
looks very cinematic, and I know they shot a lot of stuff on the volume. There was some CG things that I was like, that looks a little bit. They could have used a little bit more time on that CG, but for the most part, I think um, all of the things came together. Everything meshed to the point that I was like, oh man, this is like giving me those vibes and that feeling again. And you and I talked, as we were watching it, we were talking,
Yeah.
and I loved the titles, like these very much like Stranger Things
Yeah.
80s vibe of the title sequences on both episodes. In the second episode, they did the previously on Skeleton Crew, and it puts you in that mood. It puts you in that feeling of like an 80s. We're going to say Amblin a number of times here, but I think
For
they
those
have
at home who
achieved it.
don't know what Amblin Amblin is Steven Spielberg's production company that he, like because Steven Spielberg had all these ideas, back in the early '80s, he couldn't make all of them, and so he created his production company for people like Richard Donner to make Goonies and other directors to make these things. And so when we talk about Amblin, we're talking about that early '80s Spielberg vibe, Stranger Things kind of stuff. That's what Stranger Things takes its inspiration from.
And a lot
Is
of
those things?
Yeah, and a lot of just kids going on adventures. And
Yeah.
when this started, and Wim was like on his bike, and the plot pieces were moving into place, and I was like, oh man, this feels good. It feels like
Mm-hmm.
these movies that I watched as a kid and growing up. And I feel like this is very much aimed at us, like our generation. And I think they really connected. John Watts and everybody involved so far in these first two episodes. I think they have done a fantastic job. And
Well, John
I
Watts has this gift as a director, is that he's really good with kids. Really good. I don't know if you've ever seen I think it was the first movie he directed, Cop Car.
I
Uh,
haven't. Yeah,
with
I've
Kevin.
heard about it.
I watched it as soon as he was announced as director for Spider-Man: Homecoming,
Ah,
and I was blown away with how like the kids were carrying the story. And when we got to Spider-Man: Homecoming, Spider-Man: Far From Home, and Spider-Man: No Way Home, that really, because the way he worked with Tom Holland, with Zendaya, with all the different teenage and kid actors in those films, like really stood out. And I got a sense of that again here with Win. And I have a question for you. How does it feel to have your son be in a Star Wars show?
man, I really connected with Wim as a character because I saw my son. First of all, his curly hair
Oh yeah,
was the first indicator, but yeah, it really connected me to the character that he looks very similar to my son, and even he also voiced the smallest kid in Encanto. I don't know if you know his name off the top of your head.
not off the
I'm
top of my head.
blanking.
I know who. You sent me a picture. I'm like, oh yeah, that kid.
Yeah,
Yeah,
the one that could talk to animals, and even my wife. That is a
Antonio.
yes, Antonio. Which I ended up getting like a storybook from Disney Plus rewards or the movie rewards that they have. I had this Antonio storybook, but my wife watched that Encanto, nonstop. It was released right after my son was born,
Oh wow.
so there's like all these connective tissue of my family to this actor now. Like he's been a part of that, and then he just happens to look very similar to my son in real life. So it made me feel good, Tim. It made me
Right.
feel happy
Yeah, yeah.
every time I saw him.
Um, and going back to, Wim and Neil and their dynamic with their friendship was so sweet and so
Yes,
great. And seeing them play with Star Wars toys
yes,
was not something that I don't know if it was something that I wanted. But having seen, I mean, because it makes sense from a story standpoint. You have, this is the time of the New Republic. It's set around the same time as the Mandalorian, Book of Boba Fett, and Ahsoka, and so when all these adventures have happened, with Luke and Leia and Han and all the rebels, it makes sense that there would be toys of these things. It's not something that I thought about in the world of Star Wars, but I really loved it. I really loved that Wim and Neil were like playing lightsaber, and it makes sense that he would want an adventure because Wim has probably grown up hearing about the adventures, reading them on his iPad, and that was really cool seeing all these different things that he was reading, these Star Wars things that we've read, read Star Wars books, throughout our lives, and hearing these stories and fantasizing, making the lightsaber noise as kids. And it just like really brought a childlike innocence to this project, that to this series, that I wasn't really expecting. And it was just like, wow. Like, I mean, like, it's not, like I said, it's not something that I thought that I wanted to see, but having seen it, I'm like, this just makes total sense. Like, this makes total sense in this world. It makes total sense that these kids would do that. And yeah, it just was fantastic.
Yeah, and I think that was very much intentional by the creators. And you could go one of two ways with that. I think one way you could go is okay, it connects you to it because we as humans, we have that experience in our lives. We know what the suburbs are like. We know what it's like to be a kid growing up and having friends and all these things. And then I can also see, I haven't seen any reviews so far say this or take this stance, but I can see maybe someone in the comments below would say if they had this experience, does it take you out of Star Wars and say, "Oh, that's too much realism," and I go to Star Wars to escape and to be a fantasy, to be off in space. I'm I think you and I are both in that camp of it connects us to the material, it makes us say, "Oh
Mm-hmm.
yeah, this is what I know. This is how my life relates to Star Wars." So putting that, and this is like the first time we've kind of seen this. That was a big reaction when the trailer came out. It was like, "Oh, why are there roads? Why are there lawns? Like this is kind of weird." I saw that reaction a lot. But I liked it. I enjoyed seeing that and seeing them playing with the toys. That was something that I was like, oh, not only have I not seen that before, but then it also got me thinking about in Force Awakens, Ray is like Luke Skywalker. I thought he was a myth. And so
Mm-hmm.
30 years down the line, like from Return of the Jedi to Force Awakens, what happens in the galaxy to the point where there these people are not like held up on a pedestal. It's like, oh, wait a minute, do they even exist? Did the Jedi even, after they have been for thousands of years in the galaxy, do they even exist? And so I think that's interesting. I hope we get more stories to kind of fill in that backstory of what caused that. But I like having action figures, having toys, and like stories that are being told about the Jedi. That's kind of how I thought in my mind it would go after
And
Return of the Jedi.
seeing Wim play with those toys brought me back to that scene in ET where
Oh,
Elliot is
yes.
playing with and he's playing with Boba Fett and Orlando Calrissian, and it made me think of that scene. So
Yes.
so it just seeing that seeing Star Wars like used as a lens for different filmmakers, how they interpret Star Wars, because we have John Favreau and Dave Filoni who are like doing like the Seven Samurai and lone gunslinger kind of aspect to Star Wars. So that's something that speaks to them. And we have John Watts doing something, like old 80s movies, and that's something that speaks to them. And this show had so many deep cuts as a fan. I just like loved, like the names of the planets, the fact that they're still talking about the Jedi. There was a reference to the Star Wars holiday special, and it was unironic.
Yes.
And like when Wim's little brothers or siblings, I don't know if they were brothers or sisters, but his siblings, and they're watching the little hologram. I'm like, oh my gosh, they're actually pulling from the holiday special, and it's not like, oh well, we shouldn't done that, like I shouldn't have done that because this is a maligned piece of Star Wars uh, uh, history. But like people are talking about the holiday special. My wife listens to a Full House podcast called How Rude Tannerinos, and we'll often listen to it in the car while we're driving to and from where we're going. And one of the writers, who was a writer on Full House, had written the Star Wars holiday special. And
Ah.
like hearing him talk about like George Lucas's intentions with Star Wars at that time, keeping it alive when because it would be years between movies. Like, I need to keep this thing going as long as I can. And so that was cool. There is an episode of the Office Ladies podcast that is talking about the Star Wars holiday special that I can't wait to dive into. Haven't done it yet, but I'm excited. So seeing this piece of Star Wars history, often maligned piece of Star Wars history, kind of maybe kind of come back around a little bit. is kind of
Nice.
cool. Is kind of cool.
Nice.
So yeah,
Yeah. I really like what they're doing with not dumbing it down or like aiming it at a younger audience. This is kind of like what the Amblin movies did. It's aimed at an adult audience, but it stars kids. It has
yeah.
children as the antagonist,
It doesn't
and
feel dumbed down at all. It doesn't feel like it doesn't feel like something like Young Jedi Adventures on the
right,
Disney Channel,
right,
where it's being like it's a Star Wars for a younger audience, or something
right,
like Spider Man and His Amazing Friends for Marvel. Like this is something that's for children.
right.
This is something that's for anybody of any age. I think if you pop like your children in front of this, they could probably get into it really. I think really quickly.
Yeah.
Um, and so, but I wanted to talk about the opening of of these episodes. Um, we had a different kind of crawl
Mm.
than we're used to. This made me think. It kind of made me think of Solo.
Oh yeah.
Um,
Hmm.
the opening of Solo that had like more than just a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, but then would keep telling these story pieces and like the things you need to know, and that was really cool. It really
Mm.
reminded me of that because since that movie, that's not been done. They just do a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, and they just go into the story. So that was kind of cool, and seeing these pirates uh, being led by Jude Law's character. Why is he's leading these pirates when he's obviously a Jedi? Questions. I
Mm.
hope we get answers to relatively soon. Probably will because what is is the series like 8 episodes or
Yeah, I saw an interview with him, and Jude Law specifically said episode 7 we're going to get all of our answers for his character. So
great.
it's the penultimate episode. Yeah, so there's
Great.
8
Yeah,
total.
he's definitely that older mentor character that you have in these stories because um, the kids can't pilot the ship all by themselves. I mean, they're doing a good job because they've got SM-33 helping them out, and
Yes.
oh, SM-33, I loved SM-33. SM-33 was like my favorite thing in these episodes. I loved him so much. Never like there's been a lot of new Star Wars droids that have been introduced over the years. You have BB-8, you have Chopper, AP-5,
K
Lola,
K2SO.
K2SO. I was going to bring him up. And I loved K2SO when I saw Rogue One. In fact, I was very disappointed in Andor when K2SO didn't show up, or when they teased him, and I was like, ah, you, and because I love K2SO and how Alan Tudyk plays that role, and Nick Frost does a similar thing. And my burning question about SM-33 is how many freaking rats are living in him? Because I think there was like 3 over the course of these episodes.
I thought that was the same one coming back over and
That's
over
so
again, but
funny.
yeah,
If
that
that's the
was funny.
case, then I love that even more.
Yeah, I mean, and that's a good segue to like the comedy in this show. I thought was great. I was laughing throughout. I thought all the beats were great, and you have that mix of action, comedy, adventure, like all of those things. And again, that's I think that formula for a Amblin style is there and present, and it was successful. Like all of the things for me worked. There wasn't anything that I was like, oh, I was groaning like that. That one didn't hit the mark, right? I felt like every time I was supposed to laugh, I was laughing. Every time I was supposed to be um, like on this adventure with them, I was like, oh yeah, I'm exhilarated. I'm excited that there's they're going someplace. They're going in hyperspace for the first time. And there's also the mystery element. Like you were saying, you hope you find out more about Jude Law's character. I want to know, why is the planet being hidden? Why is it under this type of
Because no one
dome
seems to know
almost?
know what this planet is.
Right.
Like when someone when Fern tells somebody like, "Oh, we're from this planet," and you're just like, "What planet?
Yeah.
Like what planet's that? Like did you mean this planet? Did you mean this planet? Like no, we meant I can't remember what it's called.
There was a number of SF-33 was naming off a number of planets. He was like, "Oh, you didn't mean at Atten, you meant
Avalon,
He's yeah. There was
Aldani.
yeah, Aldani. There was an Andor reference. There was a Rebels reference. So there's so many references to other Star Wars things, like you said, the holiday special.
And like
All
going off of like the maligned thing is the ferryman creature, um, like straight up from Ewok Adventure.
yes,
Those made for TV Ewok movies, and so, like just pulling from all these like just deep cut Star Wars stuff that you won't, because obviously you think of pulling from the original trilogy and and the prequels because everybody knows those, but the fact that John Watts and Christopher Ford, who wrote these two episodes, are pulling from these just deep cut Star Wars stuff that only the hardest core of fans is going to pick up, because because people who are getting into Star Wars now, they haven't seen the Ewok Adventure. They haven't seen the Star Wars Holiday Special. And if they hear about it, they're like, oh, I heard it's a thing that was awful. And I don't want to watch that.
right.
And so, and the fact that they're pulling from these avenues is just crazy.
Yeah,
And like it's still it's fun. It balances comedy and drama really well. I love the back and forth between the girls and the boys because that's just such a kid thing to do.
those
As
stink boys.
yeah, stink boys, like those those dumb boys, those
Yeah,
dumb girls. It was so funny.
yeah, that was
um
great.
that was great. And because like the girl, like because that's just something that when you're interacting with girls as at this age and you're a boy, um, the girls will make you do all the work when they want to do something, and because they're just standing there, it's like those dumb boys.
Yeah,
We're having them work for us, and it's like those dumb girls. They don't know how to do anything.
yeah,
It was
that
it
was
was
great.
it was really great. It was really great. It was very true to life for kids.
And that's where I think it's a strength and not a hindrance. Like I said, you can go one of two ways. Like, oh, it's too much like real life, and I want more fantasy, like a galaxy far, far away. Or you can go, oh, that's relatable. I know that story, and even I think you should have the relatable even in the fantasy, even in the original trilogy. Like, even though they're on a spaceship, they're far away, we're still relating to the characters. And that's what made us love the original trilogy. That's what made
Mhm.
Star Wars a phenomenon, was the characters. And you got invested and you cared about the characters from the opening crawl, from like, I don't know any other movie that I'm as invested as quickly as A New Hope. Like, from the very first moment, like, you want to know, oh, who is that character? Who are the droids? Who's Princess Leia? Who's Luke Skywalker? Like, who's Darth Vader? Even the
What's the Senate?
enemies.
What's the Empire?
Right.
What's the rebellion? Like you have all these questions, and it's one of those things where the story is moving forward. The setting is moving forward, like before we even meet our main character.
Yeah.
Because the one rule of writing is you want to introduce your main character, but like really quickly,
Hmm.
and it takes us time to do that. And George Lucas created this great world that we're still talking about today. And Skeleton Crew is like hitting the ground running, and like there's so many questions about like why is a Jedi temple on this like planet that looks like it's straight out of an 80s movie, um, and
Why
why
are they in this dome? Why I had this barrier that they're not supposed to cross, and they've never seen stars before. The whole planet seems to be run by droids, where they're doing all the menial tasks, and then all the humans are, they're strictly like, okay, you got to learn your math, and then you're going to go into your job and be like Wim's dad. Like, everything is just
because
by
we
the
all want to
numbers,
be
by the
like Wim's
books.
dad, right?
And then
Oh my gosh,
they
he
hadn't
was the
seen,
worst.
yeah, they hadn't seen the Republic credits when they got out, and they thought their planet was a myth. Like, all these mysteries are keeping me intrigued and hooked. Of, oh man, what is going to happen? I don't know where this is going, and I think that's
Yeah.
a good thing. And you mentioned real quick about the Jude Law thing, about him being a Jedi. I When he was using the Force, I was questioning, is he doing some type of trick that they can't see it and they're gonna reveal it later that, oh, he
Like
was on a
that,
wire or something.
oh, that one character in Obi-Wan.
Yeah, dang, now I'm blanking on his name, but
Yeah,
the comedian.
yeah,
Yes.
and like he was like pulling a fast one. Like he could be
Yeah.
doing that because obviously he was leading the pirates at the beginning of the episode of the first episode, and then at the end of the second episode he's using the Force. It's just like these two things don't add up, uh,
Right.
and so to seeing how that kind of plays out. Also, I wanted to give a shout out to Mick Giacchino doing the
Yes.
music for this show. I think he had a strong task ahead of him, not just in doing a Star Wars show and making it unique, because that's the challenge, and like the standout music for live action Star Wars over apart from John Williams, of course, has been um, uh, Louis Göransson,
Oh, yes, yes,
who
yes.
does the Mandalorian
Mm.
scores, and I think I really liked what Mick Giacchino, who's Michael Giacchino's son, so and who has his own experience with Star Wars and franchise stuff. He was able to find this balance that I found very interesting. Like it felt like Star Wars, the music felt like Star Wars, but also felt like E.T., both of which John Williams worked on. And so it felt like this nice mesh between E.T. and Star Wars that I really liked. And I found myself just like tapping my toes as I'm listening to the score. It's
Yes.
fantastic.
I
Um,
I also enjoyed it, and it's also crazy to think his dad scored Rogue One, and now we've got this father and son um, team in Star Wars, like in the universe. They've made music for different Star Wars things, so that's fun, and also a family ties into the family aspect as well.
yeah, yeah,
So yeah,
and Mick Giacchino's having a good year because he not only did this, but he also did the Penguin score, which is
yes, yep,
fantastic.
yep. So great, kudos to Mick Giacchino, and we'll see where it goes from here. But yeah, I think the cast, the
Mm-hmm.
kids, and then the mystery is what I think is really kind of pushing me along and saying, "Man, I want to know more. I'm intrigued. I want to see what happens next."
And as
So
much
I'm
as I
really
loved the
enjoying it.
acolyte, I think the mystery was probably one of the weakest aspects of it.
Yeah, right.
Looking back on it,
Hmm.
and because it doesn't feel like that the where the mystery is going is tipping its hand too much, and it doesn't feel obvious. Where
Right.
with the acolyte, it was fairly obvious that Manny Jacinto was going to be the secret Sith.
Yeah.
Um, and so it doesn't feel like the mystery doesn't feel obvious. It feels like every question that we're getting is giving its proper weight, and we're gonna get that. Yeah, the cast is fantastic. Like everyone is just on top of their game.
Yeah.
Jude Law's great for what little screen time we got from him, which I was surprised about actually. I was thinking that we were going to get his reveal at the end of episode one, but it didn't happen at the end of episode two, which not a bad thing. I just was
Right.
surprised.
Yeah, and I think he's going to be like the big besides the kids, all the marketing is on Jude Law. Like he's the big name for this show.
Yeah.
And so a lot of it is going to fall on his shoulders, and I think he's a he's a capable actor. He's going to do a great job. But we'll see at the end. Let's check back at the end of Skeleton Crew. Did all of I think the mysteries add up to anything, and did they have a an interesting resolution?
Right.
Because I think Acolyte it didn't, and that's why I wish there was a season two of Acolyte because
Yeah.
there were still things that I wanted to know about the
Mm-hmm.
universe and about the stories. So excellent first two episodes for Skeleton Crew. Super Tim and I are pumped to see the next episode, and we're going to be doing weekly reviews here on Trust in the Force. We're interested to see what did you think about the first two episodes of Skeleton Crew, and what are your expectations for the remainder of the season? Whether it's good or bad, I want to hear it in the comments section down below, and we will be back next week. talking more Skeleton Crew, we would be honored if you would join us.
Trust only in the Force.